The champagne glass felt cold against my palm when Tessa's voice cut through the charity gala like a blade. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, loud enough for heads to turn. "This table is for executives and their families. You're just IT support, right?" Her diamonds caught the light as she gestured toward the back of the ballroom. "The staff section is over there, honey." I stood there in my borrowed dress, feeling 200 pairs of eyes lock onto me. My boss, her husband Adrian Kane, CEO of Apex Technologies, turned red but said nothing. He just looked down at his wine glass like it held answers. I didn't argue. I didn't make a scene. I picked up my name card, smiled politely, and said, "Of course, Mrs. Kane, enjoy your evening." Then I walked toward the coat check, pulled out my phone, and sent a single text message to the Forbes reporter I'd been quietly feeding information to for 6 months. "It's time. Publish everything." What Tessa didn't know was that the IT support girl she just humiliated had spent 3 years documenting every illegal transaction her husband made. And the article scheduled to drop Monday morning would change everything. I didn't go home that night. I drove to the lake house my grandmother left me, the one nobody at work knew existed. The road was dark and winding, giving me time to think about how I got here. 3 years ago, I joined Apex Technologies as a junior systems analyst. Nothing glamorous. I fixed servers, managed databases, ran security checks. The kind of work that makes you invisible. But being invisible taught me something valuable. People talk freely around someone they don't see as a threat. Adrian held strategy meetings in his office while I installed software updates. Tessa planned her charity events on calls she took in the break room, never noticing me refilling my coffee. I heard everything. Vendor kickbacks disguised as consulting fees, donations that circled back to personal accounts, board reports with numbers that didn't match the source files. At first I thought I was paranoid. Then I started keeping copies. Just in case. Just to protect myself if anyone ever tried to blame me for their mistakes. The Forbes reporter's name was Tyler Hammond. I'd met him at a tech conference 8 months ago where he spoke about corporate fraud. After his panel, I approached him carefully. Not with accusations, just questions. Hypothetically, I'd asked, if someone noticed financial irregularities in a charity fund, what would be the legal way to report it? His eyes had sharpened with interest. Hypothetically, he'd replied, that someone would need documentation, lots of it. Dates, amounts, names, and they'd need to be prepared for war. I'd nodded and walked away. 2 weeks later, I'd sent him an encrypted email from a burner account. No names, just numbers. Transaction IDs that didn't add up. Vendor invoices with suspicious patterns. He'd replied within an hour, "I need to verify these. Can we meet?" We'd met in coffee shops across 3 different cities over the next 6 months. I never told him my name. He never asked. He just kept digging deeper, matching my documents with public records, building an airtight case. Monday morning, my phone exploded with notifications before my alarm even went off. The Forbes article had published at 6 a.m. The headline read, "Tech Giants Charity Scandal, How Millions Were Diverted Through Shell Companies." I sat up in bed, heart pounding, and read through it twice. Tyler had done exactly what I'd hoped. He'd followed the money trail without naming his source. The article detailed how Apex Technologies' charitable foundation had funneled donations through vendor accounts that were secretly owned by family members of company executives. It mentioned shell companies registered in Delaware, payments to consulting firms that didn't exist, tax documents that told 2 different stories. My name appeared nowhere in the article, but Adrian's did, and so did Tessa's. The comment section was already filling up with outrage. Investors demanding investigations and donors calling for refunds. Employees asking how much the leadership knew. I made coffee with steady hands and waited for my phone to ring. The call came at 7:30. Unknown number. I answered on the 3rd ring. "Kara Whitfield?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes. This is Patricia Volkov from Apex's board of directors. We need you to come in for a meeting today. 9 a.m. My stomach tightened. "What's this regarding?" "I think you know," she said, not unkindly. "We're assembling an emergency session to address the Forbes article. Your name came up in our internal review as someone who might have relevant information." I paused, choosing my words carefully. I'd be happy to attend with my attorney present. There was a brief silence. That won't be necessary unless you feel you need representation. I feel I need representation, I replied calmly. Then 9:30. Conference room A. She hung up. I called my lawyer immediately. Her name was Diana Torres, a woman who'd built her career defending whistleblowers. When I explained the situation, she didn't hesitate. Don't say anything until I get there. And Kara? Be prepared for them to make you the villain. I arrived at Apex headquarters at 9:15, wearing a navy suit that made me look serious and untouchable. Diana met me in the parking garage, briefcase in hand, expression sharp as broken glass. Remember, she said as we walked toward the elevator, you are not the criminal here. You are a witness, possibly a victim of workplace retaliation. Let me handle the talking unless they ask you a direct question. The elevator ride up felt like descending into cold water. When the doors opened, the office was chaos. People huddled in small groups, whispering. Phones rang unanswered. Someone from accounting was crying in the hallway. Security escorted us to conference room A. Inside, 5 board members sat around a long table. Patricia Volkov was at the head, her gray hair pulled back tight, her expression unreadable. Adrian was there too, looking like he hadn't slept. Tessa sat beside him, her face a mask of composure, but her hands were clenched white-knuckled in her lap. When she saw me, her eyes narrowed to slits. Patricia spoke first. Ms. Whitfield, thank you for coming. I'll be direct. Did you provide information to Forbes for their article? Diana answered before I could. My client is here voluntarily to assist your internal review. However, any questions about her communications with media will need to go through proper legal channels. Patricia nodded slowly. Understood. Let me rephrase. Ms. Whitfield, in your role as systems analyst, did you ever observe financial irregularities related to the charitable foundation? I glanced at Diana. She gave a small nod. Yes, I said clearly. I observed multiple irregularities over the past 3 years. Adrian's face went pale. Tessa leaned forward. That's a lie. She's lying because I embarrassed her at the gala. Patricia held up a hand. Mrs. Kane, please. Then to me, what kind of irregularities? Duplicate invoices. Payments to vendors with no service records. Donation routing through accounts that didn't match our standard protocols. I flagged several of these concerns through the internal compliance system, but they were dismissed as clerical errors. The room went silent. One of the board members, an older man named Harold, spoke up. You flagged these concerns? Do you have proof of that? Diana reached into her briefcase and pulled out a folder. My client submitted 14 separate compliance reports over the past 18 months. Each one was logged in your internal system with timestamps and case numbers. Here are the printed copies. She slid the folder across the table. Patricia opened it slowly, scanning the pages. Her expression darkened with each one. These reports were closed without investigation, she said quietly. Who closed them? Harold leaned over to read. Every single one was closed by... He looked up at Adrian. By you. Adrian's jaw tightened. I closed them because they were minor accounting discrepancies. Nothing that warranted a full investigation. Minor? Diana's voice was sharp. Mr. Kane, these reports document over $4 million in questionable transactions. That's not minor, that's systemic fraud. Tessa stood up abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. This is ridiculous. She's trying to destroy us because she's jealous. Patricia's voice cut through the room like steel. Mrs. Kane, sit down, now. Tessa sat, but her eyes burned with rage focused entirely on me. Patricia continued. Mr. Kane, you will be placed on immediate administrative leave pending a full forensic audit. Mrs. Kane, your access to any company accounts or charitable foundation resources is suspended effective immediately. Adrian's face went from pale to crimson. You can't do this. I built this company. And you may have destroyed it, Patricia replied coldly. This board has a fiduciary duty to our shareholders and donors. We will conduct a thorough investigation, and if we find evidence of criminal activity, we will cooperate fully with law enforcement. She turned to me. Miss Whitfield, we will need your full cooperation with the audit team. You will be placed on paid administrative leave during the investigation to avoid any appearance of impropriety. Diana nodded. That's acceptable. As we stood to leave, Tessa's voice followed us, shaking with fury. You think you've won? You're nobody. You'll always be nobody. Diana and I left the building through the side exit to avoid the news crews already gathering out front. In her car, she turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Kara, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Did you take any company documents without authorization?" I met her eyes. "I made copies of documents I was legally authorized to access as part of my job responsibilities. I kept them in a personal encrypted drive in case I ever needed to defend myself against false accusations. Everything I copied I had legitimate access to." She studied me for a long moment. "Good, because if they try to flip this into a theft of intellectual property case, we need to be clean." "I am clean," I said firmly. "Everything I did was to protect myself and protect the company from fraud. Then we're in a strong position." She started the car. "Now comes the hard part, waiting." I leaned back against the seat, suddenly exhausted. "How long will that take?" "Forensic audits? Could be weeks, could be months. But Kara? Yes? You did the right thing. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." The first week was quiet. Too quiet. I stayed at the lake house, away from my apartment in the city where reporters had started showing up. Diana called daily with updates. The board had hired an outside firm to conduct the audit. Adrian had retained a high-powered defense attorney. Tessa was posting on social media about persecution and false accusations, painting herself as a victim of a disgruntled employee's vendetta. I didn't respond. I didn't post. I didn't give interviews. I just waited like Diana told me to. On Thursday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "You made a big mistake. People like you don't win against people like us." I screenshot it and sent it to Diana immediately. She called back within minutes. "That's witness intimidation. I'm forwarding this to the board and to local law enforcement. Do not respond. Do not engage." "I wasn't planning to," I said, but my hands were shaking. That night, I checked the locks on every door twice before I could sleep. Week 2 brought the first real development. Tyler Hammond published a follow-up article. This one was more explosive than the first. "New evidence suggests systematic pattern of fraud at Apex Technologies," the headline read. Sources close to the investigation reveal that shell companies tied to CEO Adrian Kane and his wife Tessa Kane received over $8 million in charitable donations over a 5-year period. The funds were allegedly used for personal expenses, including luxury renovations, designer clothing, and private travel. The article included screenshots of bank statements, incorporation documents, and email chains. I recognized some of the documents. They were ones I'd provided months ago. But there were new ones too. Tyler had clearly found other sources. The public reaction was immediate and brutal. Apex's stock dropped 12% in one day. Major donors to the charitable foundation issued statements demanding accountability. 3 board members resigned, and the district attorney's office announced they were opening a criminal investigation. Diana called me that evening. "Kara, things are about to get intense. Are you prepared for that?" "I don't know," I admitted, "but I can't stop now." The subpoena arrived on Monday morning. Not for me, for Adrian. He was being called to testify before a grand jury. According to Tyler's sources, investigators had found enough evidence to suggest criminal fraud and tax evasion. Tessa was also subpoenaed. The news hit social media like wildfire. Hashtags started trending. Former employees began sharing their own stories of questionable practices at Apex. Some talked about being asked to backdate documents. Others mentioned expense reports that didn't make sense. A few mentioned me by name, saying I'd tried to raise concerns before and was shut down. That afternoon, I received an email from Patricia Volkov. "Miss Whitfield, the board would like to meet with you again. This time it's not an interrogation. We owe you an apology and a conversation about your future with this company. Would you be available this week?" I showed Diana the email. She smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in weeks. "This is good. This means they're seeing you as an ally, not a threat. Should I meet with them?" "Absolutely, but I'm coming with you." The second board meeting felt different. Patricia greeted us at the door herself, shaking my hand with what seemed like genuine respect. "Miss Whitfield, thank you for coming back. I know our last meeting wasn't easy." We sat down at the same conference table, but this time, Adrian and Tessa were nowhere to be seen. Instead, there were 3 board members I recognized. and two new faces. A man and a woman in expensive suits who introduced themselves as the forensic audit team leaders. The man spoke first. "Miss Whitfield, we've spent the past 2 weeks reviewing every document you flagged in your compliance reports. We've also examined the materials provided to Forbes and cross-referenced them with our internal systems. What we found is deeply troubling." He opened a laptop and turned it toward me. On the screen was a spreadsheet with rows of transactions highlighted in red. "Every single concern you raised was valid. In fact, the scope of the fraud is larger than we initially thought. We've identified over $12 million in misappropriated funds." My breath caught. 12 million. That was more than I'd even suspected. The woman from the audit team continued. "Mr. Kane structured these transactions carefully. He used his authority as CEO to bypass normal approval processes. Mrs. Kane served as the public face of the charitable foundation, which gave them cover to route donations through vendors she personally controlled. It was sophisticated and deliberate." Patricia leaned forward. "Miss Whitfield, here's what I need you to understand. Your compliance reports should have triggered an investigation years ago. The fact that they didn't represents a massive failure in our oversight. That failure is on us, not you." Harold, the older board member, spoke up. "We also reviewed the internal communications around your reports. Mr. Kane explicitly instructed other executives to dismiss your concerns. In some cases, he suggested you were inexperienced and overly cautious. He created an environment where speaking up about irregularities was discouraged." I felt a wave of validation wash over me. For 3 years, I'd wondered if I was imagining problems, if I was being paranoid or difficult. Hearing them confirm that I'd been right all along was overwhelming. Diana squeezed my hand under the table. Patricia continued, "Which brings us to why we asked you here today. Miss Whitfield, we would like to offer you a new position, Director of Compliance and Ethics. You would report directly to the board and have authority to investigate any financial concerns across the entire organization. We need someone who isn't afraid to ask hard questions, someone who has proven they will do the right thing even when it's difficult." I stared at her, stunned. "I'm not sure I understand." "We're offering you a promotion," Harold said gently, "a significant one, with a substantial salary increase and equity stake in the company. You saved Apex from destroying itself. We want you to help us rebuild it the right way." Diana's smile was wide now. "Can we have some time to discuss the details of the offer?" "Of course," Patricia said. "Take all the time you need. But Miss Whitfield, I want you to know something. You were never nobody. You were the one person in this entire organization who had the courage and integrity to stand up for what was right. That makes you somebody. That makes you essential." Diana and I left the building and walked to a nearby coffee shop. She ordered us both cappuccinos and sat across from me with an expression that was part pride, part concern. "This is a good offer, Kara, really good. But I need you to think carefully about whether you want to stay at Apex after everything that happened." I stirred my coffee, thinking, part of me wants to walk away. Tessa humiliated me. Adrian tried to destroy my career. Why would I stay? Valid questions. Diana agreed. But here's another perspective. If you leave, they get to say you were just a disgruntled employee who caused trouble and left. If you stay in a position of real authority, you get to reshape the entire compliance culture. You get to make sure what happened to you never happens to anyone else. I looked out the window at people walking past, living their normal lives, unaware of the battle I'd been fighting. "I want to accept," I said slowly, "but I have conditions." Diana pulled out a notepad. "Tell me what you need." Over the next week, Diana negotiated my new contract. My conditions were simple but non-negotiable. First, I wanted a public statement from the board acknowledging that my compliance reports had been accurate and that I had acted appropriately. Second, I wanted a seat on the board of directors as a non-voting observer. Third, I wanted guaranteed legal protection and indemnification if Adrian or Tessa tried to sue me for defamation or any related claims. Fourth, I wanted the authority to hire my own team and implement new compliance protocols without executive interference. And finally, I wanted an official apology from the company for the way I'd been treated, particularly regarding the Gala incident. To my surprise, the board agreed to everything. The public statement went out on their website and social media. Apex Technologies acknowledges that former systems analyst Kara Whitfield acted with integrity and professionalism in reporting financial irregularities. Her actions have helped us identify serious misconduct and have positioned us to rebuild trust with our stakeholders. We are grateful for her dedication to ethical practices. The comments section filled with support. Current and former employees thanked me. Donors praised my courage. A few trolls tried to defend Adrian and Tessa, but they were drowned out by the overwhelming positive response. My first day as Director of Compliance was surreal. I had an actual office now, with windows and a door that locked. My nameplate looked strange and official. My new assistant, a sharp woman named Priya, had already organized my calendar and set up meetings with every department head. But the most significant moment came at 10 a.m. when I held my first all-hands meeting with the entire compliance team. There were 12 people in the room, ranging from fresh graduates to seasoned auditors. They looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and respect. "I'm not going to pretend I have all the answers," I began. 3 weeks ago, I was the junior systems analyst nobody paid attention to. But that invisibility taught me something important. Problems don't fix themselves. Ignoring red flags doesn't make them go away. It just makes them worse. I looked around the room. From this day forward, every concern raised in this department will be investigated. No exceptions. No one will be punished for asking questions or flagging irregularities. And if anyone at any level tries to shut you down, you come directly to me. We are the firewall between good business and fraud. Let's act like it. 2 weeks into my new role, the district attorney's office held a press conference. They announced formal charges against Adrian Kane and Tessa Kane. 12 counts of wire fraud, 8 counts of tax evasion, 4 counts of money laundering. The bail was set at $5 million each. Tyler Hammond covered the press conference live. His article that evening was detailed and damning. Former tech CEO and wife faced decades in prison for charity fraud scheme. He quoted prosecutors saying the evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, emails, testimony from vendors who'd been paid to create fake invoices. Even some members of Adrian's own executive team had turned on him, providing statements in exchange for immunity. I watched the press conference from my office, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Relief that justice was finally happening, sadness that it had come to this, and a quiet satisfaction that I'd done the right thing, even when it had felt impossible. Priya knocked on my door. "Kara, there's someone here to see you. She says her name is Tessa Kane." My first instinct was to refuse, to have security escort her out, but curiosity won. "I'll see her, but stay close." Tessa walked into my office looking nothing like the woman who'd humiliated me at the Gala. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced by jeans and a plain sweater. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her eyes were red-rimmed and exhausted. She sat down across from me without being invited. "I'm not here to apologize," she said flatly. "Good," I replied, "because I wouldn't believe it. I'm here to ask if you'll testify against Adrian." I blinked, genuinely surprised. "You're turning on him?" "He's turning on me," she said bitterly. "His lawyers are trying to claim I masterminded everything, that he was just following my directions. They're going to paint me as the manipulative wife who led him astray." "And that's not true?" Tessa laughed, a hollow sound. "Of course it's not entirely true. But it's not entirely false either. We did this together. But I'm not going to prison for 40 years while he walks away." She leaned forward. "I know things. About offshore accounts, about other board members who look the other way. If you help me, I'll help the prosecution." I stared at Tessa, trying to read whether she was genuine or just desperate. Probably both. "Why would I help you? You called me a nobody. You tried to humiliate me in front of hundreds of people." "Because you're not a nobody," Tessa said quietly. "That's why I did it. I knew you were a threat. I could see it in the way Adrian talked about you. Always complaining about your compliance reports. Always saying you asked too many questions. I knew you were dangerous to us, so I tried to make you small. It didn't work." She paused. "You were always going to win, Kara. I just didn't want to admit it." I sat back in my chair. I need to talk to the prosecutors and my lawyer before I agree to anything. "But Tessa, understand something. I don't care about you. I care about justice. If your information helps them build a stronger case against everyone involved in this fraud, then fine, but don't expect mercy from me. Tessa nodded slowly. I don't expect mercy. I expect consequences. I just want them to be fair. After she left, I called Diana immediately. The next 3 months were a blur of depositions, meetings with prosecutors, and media attention I never wanted. Tyler Hammond published several more articles, each one peeling back another layer of the fraud. Tessa had been telling the truth. Her information led to charges against 2 more board members and 3 vendors who'd participated in the scheme. Adrian's trial was set for early next year. Tessa had taken a plea deal, 15 years in federal prison in exchange for full cooperation. The prosecutors said her testimony would be crucial. One evening, Diana called me with unexpected news. Forbes wants to do a profile on you, a long-form piece about whistleblowers and corporate accountability. Tyler's writing it. I hesitated. I don't know if I want to be the face of this story. You already are, Diana said gently. But this is your chance to control the narrative, to tell your side without filters. Think about it. I thought about the gala, about Tessa's voice calling me a nobody, about 3 years of being invisible, ignored, dismissed. Maybe it was time to be seen. The Forbes profile published on a Tuesday morning. The headline read, "The Accountant Who Wouldn't Stay Quiet, How Kara Whitfield Exposed a Multi-million-dollar Fraud." Tyler had interviewed me for hours, asking about my background, my motivations, my fears. He'd talked to Diana, to Patricia, to other employees at Apex who'd witnessed what happened. But the most powerful part of the article was the section about the gala. He'd obtained footage from that night, security cameras that captured Tessa's dismissal and my calm exit. He described the moment in detail, then added, "What Tessa Kane didn't know that night was that Kara Whitfield held more power than anyone in that room. Not because of her title or salary, but because she had something far more valuable, the truth." The article went viral within hours. It was shared across social media, picked up by major news outlets, discussed on business podcasts. People started calling me a hero. Others called me a traitor. I didn't feel like either. I just felt like someone who'd done what needed to be done. 6 months after the gala, Apex Technologies held a new charity event. This time, it was transparent, carefully audited, and designed to rebuild trust with donors. Patricia asked me to speak briefly about the new compliance protocols we'd implemented. I stood at the podium in a black dress I'd bought specifically for this moment. Not borrowed, not rented, mine. I looked out at the crowd and saw faces I recognized. Board members who'd supported me, employees who'd thanked me privately, reporters who'd covered the story, and I saw empty seats where Adrian and Tessa should have been. "A year ago," I began, "I stood in a room like this and someone told me I was nobody, that I didn't belong at the table with important people. Tonight, I stand here not because I proved her wrong, but because I proved something more important. That integrity matters more than status. That speaking up matters more than staying comfortable. That the truth, no matter how inconvenient, is always worth defending." I paused, letting the words settle. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who refused to be silent. And if that's what it takes to be somebody, then I hope we're all somebody. Thank you. The applause was genuine and long. As I walked off the stage, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because I'd won, but because I'd survived. And that was enough.